people at the bottom of the end of the scale who do all most of the consumption in our economy, by not providing them with welfare payments, with benefits, etc. These people stop consuming and it slows down economic growth. If you want higher GDP, there always has to be some level of unemployment. And what are these people going to do other than just starve? Whatever, they're all just supposed to like be homeless on the street, just beg for money for people. Yes, it is that simple. The boss just goes and gets a job. It's exactly the same situation for both of you. Both of you will just get another job. There's no additional risk. It's just you're demonizing a tiny minority because you've been told by the mainstream media that these people are a problem to demonize, when the economy could be just as strong and function just as well, because you're making a moralistic point about essentially what I was sort of saying before about how fair something is. Well, it's not fair. So I did a TikTok responding to a guy called Egghead Chris, who was making some comments. He made an original video about how he gets angry at people on benefits at the time, right? And I responded saying, I made 3 key points in my response. First of all, in the, why are you getting mad at poor people scraping a living on benefits when your boss is extracting your surplus value, when unemployment is necessary under capitalism, because otherwise you get an inflationary spiral. Like the Bank of England literally targets 4% unemployment. Like the lowest unemployment is like 3.9% in this country under Callaghan. And the other point I made was that I forget exactly what the other point was now, but whatever. He did a response video. The other point that I made was that the people on the bottom end of the economy are all consumers, right? So the money that they spend goes back into the economy, and it gets goes back in, whether it's taxes or then it goes to other people's profit margins, etc., etc. So having people on the bottom rung who are on benefits consuming is a net good for the economy regardless, because that money doesn't get spaffed away. That continues circulating throughout the economy and probably finds its way back to you, like at the end of the day, right? And he did a response video to me. Like I asked him if he wanted to debate in the comments of his video, but he never responded. So I'm gonna do a response on YouTube, because or Twitch, I guess, at this point, and then upload it to YouTube later on, because he doesn't want to actually come on stream and debate this shit. Or at least he didn't respond about debating. Maybe he's not seen my comment. I don't even know. But we're gonna have a look and see his response here. Egghead Reboiled. Let's have a look at his video.
Onto leftist TikTok. One of my videos just made it onto leftist TikTok. Shall we check it out together?
And secondly, there's someone who takes far more of the money that you earn. Your fucking boss, mate. Any profit that's been generated by the business that you work for has been extracted from the surplus value of your labour, mate.
Alright, so this is the main point of this person's video that I want to...
Well, it wasn't my main point of the video that I made, actually. I think the main point, actually, the biggest thrust of my arguing about getting angry at people on benefits was mostly because they're not a net drain on the economy again, because they spend, and also because it's necessary. It's absolutely 100% necessary to have unemployment under capitalism. The main point of my video, which he responded right at the end of this, rather than, at the climax or whatever, was about the fact that people who are on unemployment are necessary under a capitalist economy. There has to be some level of unemployment. The reason why there's an inflationary spiral is because of the tighter the labour market gets, the more competition there is to fight for the labourers in the first place, which increases overall wages, which then has a net effect on inflation, because unions can then bargain for better wages, which means you get a wage price spiral. So that's the overall argument about why there needs to be unemployment in the UK economy. It's only the lack of union density in this country that has meant that the tight labour market has not left us with with increasing wages, because everyone's on incredibly precarious gig economy employment, non-union, etc. So people aren't actually fighting for these wages at the moment. People still come out of the pandemic. It's a complex issue, right? But there always has to be some level of unemployment. And what are these people going to do other than just starve? Whatever, they're all just supposed to like be homeless on the street, just beg for money for people. If we just get rid of the welfare system, because these people are always going to be unemployed under capitalism. But whatever, he's responding to my critique of surplus labor, theories of surplus value. So let's go through that, the first part anyway.
Want to pick up on. Obviously, my boss gets more money than me. Obviously, my labour generates money for my boss, and my boss takes the lion's share of it. Like, that's how business works. Why would it be any
okay.
other way? The boss.
Okay, so first of all, right, why would it be any other way? Have you ever considered the existence of a cooperative, Egghead Chris, where nobody extracts anybody's surplus value? Everyone put the labour that is engaged in by every member of the cooperative goes into the cooperative. They then all democratically decide how any surplus is spent and who gets what based upon the actual labour they've contributed at that point, right? In the same way that, for example, in the Soviet Union, people were then paid out based upon the actual labour that they engaged in, rather than just as, you know, a basic wage, right? Obviously, I'm not somebody who likes the Soviet Union very much, but that's just how incomes were distributed in the Soviet Union based upon the amount of labour somebody did, right? And you can do that you can democratically decide that in a co-op. And the issue is that that capitalist institutions are a top-down structure where they just decide for you how much your labour is worth, rather than it being democratically decided amongst members of the cooperative how much of your labour value gets contributed that you get back in a wage, and how much gets contributed into the surplus that again gets spent in the actual cooperative itself, right? So businesses can be another way, right? I would also like to point out, in my initial video, I said that his boss was stealing his surplus value. And I'd like to retract that statement. Actually, it's too simplified, because it depends on the situation of the business that you're in. So, for example, if it's an LLC, then it's not even your boss. I mean, it's kind of technically your boss is taking your money from you, because they get to choose how much of that, if they don't work in the business themselves, they get to choose how much of the profit the company generates that then gets paid out to them either in dividend payments or as their own salary, because as a single person in charge of all of that, they get to decide who gets what salary and when, right? So that if it's an LLC in that case. If it's a publicly traded company, then the person who's extracting the surplus value is the shareholders, right? I don't think the CEO should get paid as much as they do regardless. I think that this level of income inequality is not good for society in general on a utilitarian basis. But even so, the actual boss in a publicly traded company is the shareholders. And the shareholders, they do no work. They contribute nothing. All they have is capital that they've then put in, and then they get capital plus dividends back out. Like, they do no work. They've contributed no labour. They've not contributed any risk. Like, they've done nothing. They're pointless. Why should your labour go towards paying out their dividend payments? It's nonsensical.
Of any company is the person who has the most responsibility on their head. Therefore, they should have the lion's share of the profit. The boss is the person.
No, I think it should be based on how much labour is contributed. They vote down the executive pay. That's their only benefit in the process. I mean, like, if you have a cooperative, like I would want, then you get to choose. There's a democratic decision based upon the members of the cooperative who pays what. And in fact, decisions are processed democratically, like what gets produced, how much gets produced, what is done with the proceeds of how these things are produced, right? And people get higher levels of job satisfaction. They have higher wages in general, and the companies are more resistant to price shocks. And you also avoids the regular pitfalls that we have of publicly traded companies, where things just get asset stripped. Because private equity companies that do buyouts of these things, like private companies or LLCs, for that matter as well, they have no incentive, once they've made a bunch of money out of the company, to then continue the profit generation if they feel they can make more money by just asset stripping it first and then just leaving it to rot afterwards, right? Which is another issue with kind of like predatory capitalism. But then again, that's an issue with that particular thing rather than the actual structure of capitalism itself. Do you know why it's called TikTok, the average content creator's attention span? I mean, it's gotten better since they've managed to get extra longer videos on the platform, but I digress.
The person that's got to make the right investments, take the right risks, has got all.
Yeah, in a cooperative, all of the investment is made as a democratic decision, right? And again, if they don't want to make the decisions, they can delegate that to other people. That's what consultancy firms are for. So, you know, they can always, if they can literally do none of this. If they're a business owner, they don't even have to do any of this. They can delegate all of that through consultancy to somebody else, and then still take all of the profits that you've engaged in with your labour, whilst also actually not contributing anything themselves. The only thing you could say is that, well, they've made the risk of putting in the initial investment in the first place. Well, hang on a minute, what's the actual risk here? Like, he's about to talk about risk at this point in let's just assume it's an LLC rather than a publicly traded company, because we're talking about a boss extracting surplus labour value here rather than shareholders doing it, right? Well, we clearly talk about an LLC, or at least he is here. So what is the risk of a business owner of putting capital into a business to be able to quote unquote invest and then get money back out of surplus labour value extraction? What happens if this business fails, right? It's an LLC. It's not personally tied to that person. All things they have in there, it's the business is its own separate entity. So if it fails, it has its own guarantors. You're not the guarantor for that. It's its own guarantor as an LLC. So if the business fails, then it just collapses. Everyone has to go and get new jobs, whatever. But that's it. The only risk of being the business owner is then becoming a member of the working class again, which is the position everybody else is already in. So why should it be that the working class are the ones who have to bear the brunt of these things, rather than members of the other classes who would then just become members of the working class if these businesses were to fail? Like, they don't experience any huge material negative benefits from any of this, especially when they pay themselves out a wage from any of the revenue that's been generated by the company anyway.
All the big decisions.
Well, no, depending how much labour they even contribute. If they don't contribute any labour, then it's not even a wage. It's literally just extraction.
If it all goes wrong, it all falls down on the head of the boss. It doesn't fall down on me.
Well, it doesn't fall down the head of the boss either, because it's an LLC, so it's a separate entity. So then the company might go bust, might go into administration or whatever. But the actual person who set that up in that instance is entirely protected by the fact that you create a separate entity at the time. Like, if you're a sole trader, that's a real different matter, but then you've not got any employees whose surplus value you're extracting, so who cares?
The labourer, if that's what you want to call me, does it, because I'll just go and get another job. Not simple for the boss, is it?
Yes, it is that simple. The boss just goes and gets a job. It's exactly the same situation for both of you. Both of you will just get another job. There's no additional risk.
I am paid what I'm worth. And if I don't like that,
you're paid what the market decides you're worth. There's a difference between that and the actual societal value of your labour. These are two different things, right? Like, again, I'm coming from the axiomatic belief that labour does create all value, because it does. In any kind of reasonable sense, right? We all understand when we think about something like you can't just throw money at a tree and turn it into a chair. The thing that turns a tree into a chair is someone's labour being applied to that tree. Very, very, I understand that's it's very, very, it's a simple, it's a simplistic analogy, but you see what I mean, right? I mean, obviously everyone else gets made redundant as well, but the risk falls down identically on everybody, because it doesn't matter whether you're the business owner or whether you're an employee of that business. If the business fails, you both just get made redundant. You will just have to get new jobs and find an additional revenue stream. That's it. It's the same level of risk regardless, by either way.
Do one of two things. One is go and work for someone else who's offering me more money, or I can decide to start my own business and have a go at it on my own. What I'm not going to do is the socialist approach, which is moan about someone else having more than what I've got.
It's interesting that he just comes down to, rather than any kind of moral axiom underpinning the structure of the system as it exists, it must just be jealousy, it must just be envy, rather than saying, well, this is a systematic problem, right? This is a systematic problem with the way in which these businesses function. If people wanted to, if businesses want to remove all of that risk of the theoretical investment that they might lose by a company going bust, having to become a regular worker, why not just turn it into a cooperative and share around the risk with everybody? I'm going to relieve you of the potential risk by spreading it out amongst everybody by making it into a cooperative. Oh, you don't want to do that because it's much easier getting other people to do work and make money off other people's hard work. Oh, that's funny, that, isn't it? Very strange, Strokey Beard. Who could have thought such a thing?
What I'll do, if I want it, is go out and fucking get it. Capitalism sets the sky as the limit. Socialists just don't want to reach for it. Reach!
I'll let him sing the song.
For the stars.
Yeah, have you considered maybe that we live on a planet with finite resources, and that if we want to make sure that there is equitable ability to be able to access those resources for everybody, having an entire system based around competition in which everybody is continually competing against each other might not be a really good society to create? As someone more enlightened than I on Twitter stated, the man with the bandit mindset cannot perceive the man without the bandit mindset cannot succeed under capitalism, and the man with the bandit mindset cannot conceive of a functional social order. Because that's the issue. Again, another issue that we have as well with capitalism is that It's predicated a lot on a lot of kind of liberal ideas. For example, take I think it's a Lockean idea of homesteading, in that if you find something natural and it's not been claimed by somebody else, part of that liberal idea of homesteading should be that you should be able to take those natural resources for yourself, to be able to use them for your own good, which is that is a reasonable precept to have. What that doesn't work as well, is when suddenly every single resource has already been captured, which is basically the situation we live in now under a global capitalist framework. Every single resource has already been captured. There's no more commons anymore. The commons is gone, right? Everything is now privatized, or the purview of some state, for example, but at least it's owned by somebody, right? The citizens of that specific country, I guess you could use as a proxy for that. You can't homestead anymore in these situations, right? But there's no common land. When it's all private, everybody owns everything. Suddenly everything is competitive, and it all becomes what the market decides, rather than people actually quote unquote going out on their own. That's why the value of your labor is only relative to what the market demands, rather than the actual value of what you contribute to society. Nothing left to sell. Exactly. See what I mean? And loads of these things break down when you reach a global scale, and so many people just think about capitalism as just being simple stickmen dodging around in imagination land, rather than something with a material reality with which it has to exist in. And again, absolutely, we're in a fairer society as well. Is this myth? This is really big myth that neoliberalism is the society of aspiration, in that suddenly if you reduce tax or whatever, or you put things into the market or whatever, you reduce regulation, this gives people more ability to be able to go out and then make something of themselves, right? But when you have a system where if you fail, it means you're left with nothing, because welfare reforms have left people who drop out of the employment racket, or who drop out of the employment sector, or who become made redundant, or, for example, maybe from their business that they created, that might fail and they end up out there looking for a job again. With the bottom rung of that ladder is so low because of benefit cuts, it makes it less likely for people to go out and then be aspirational. The easy way to be able to get people to be aspirational is have higher social spending, have higher welfare, have more things provided by the state, and then the floor is higher so that people feel safer in actually engaging in being aspirational, in being able to try and traverse through class strata. Again, I want to abolish the class hierarchy completely, but I understand at least the relevance and everything that underpins a social democratic argument, which would be a better situation that we have now. I prefer social democracy to neoliberalism, right? Anything left of neoliberalism is fine as far as I'm concerned. It would be an improvement. Jeremy Corbyn was just offering social democracy, and that was something that I heavily supported. I think socialists that poo-poo social democracy are really shooting themselves in the foot, hoping for a revolution happening overnight. Social democracy is a fine way of at least getting people's material conditions better than they are now, but I digress. But under these systems, where things are provided by the state, where there's a high level of social security, it means that if you want to take that leap to go out and be aspirational, you don't have to worry about falling on hard times and immediately being in the poorhouse like you do into neoliberalism. When if you have stronger welfare, everyone can go out and actually properly make a go of whatever they want to do. Which is why idiots like this who talk about, I want an aspirational society, people should go out there and have the gumption to go out and get it themselves, and then bemoan welfare programs that are literally the safety net that allow people the space with which they can get things together to be able to start their own business, for example. It's a nonsensical position for them to hold. For example, you look at the Marcora law in Italy, where people, to be able, as a way of solving unemployment, what they did was allow members of the unemployed class to take a windfall sum of their benefits out together as a collective to start a cooperative, and it still exists, and that law still exists today. And that was a way in which that, by having the ability for people to be able to use the power of the state to make sure that they could protect themselves from something like this going under. This is a really good way of being able to generate a quote-unquote aspirational society if that's something that you genuinely believe in. Again, I'm not making a prescriptive argument, I'm making a descriptive argument here. I'm happy whether we have a completely decommodified economy and we live in, fully automated luxury communism. But I will at least say that if you believe in aspiration, you should support social democratic principles and not neoliberal ones, like this person here seems to do. Too busy attacking people who are just so much far lower down the ladder than he is, because again, maybe it makes him feel better. Maybe he gets like some kind of perverted sense of justice by shitting on the little guy. But whatever, people are always wanting to find something that makes them feel superior. They don't like the feeling of inferiority, unless of course it's from feeling inferior to the Etonians they continue elect into office, despite them offering them actually nothing, as long as they get to shit on people lower than they do. Anyway.
You know what? I'm not going to do a second more of that. This individual also suggested that I want old people to starve because I want a stricter welfare.
I mean, my comment here was pretty facetious. I think he's being unfair on me, taking it out of context in this way, where he said that there should be a reduction in benefit spending. And I was like, well, hang on a minute. If you're going to attack people for being economically unproductive and you want to take money out of the benefit system, the biggest thing we spend on benefits in this country, more than the rest of the benefit system combined, is the state pension. Right? We spend loads of money on the state pension, and these people theoretically would able to work, right? Are you in favour of increasing the pension age? And they said, well, hang on, if we're just going to strap away all benefits because people should work if they can, and I was like, well, were you removing the state pension? Would that just leave old people to starve? That was my point. I was being pretty facetious with that, but it wasn't like a genuine attack that I genuinely thought this guy was hoping old people starve. He just hopes the people who are below the retirement age who can't work starve. So there you go.
Welfare system. That's absolutely untrue. You're just putting words in my mouth. I never said that. Old people, retired people, are one of the main reasons why the welfare system exists, and rightly so, because they need help a lot of the time. What I want to crack down on is people who are able to work, able-bodied, but choose not to work.
So everyone who is above pension age falls into that category. There's nothing saying that somebody who is the age 67 is unable to work. These people are absolutely. I work in a fucking call center. It's not hard to sit at a PC and answer calls, at least physically, right? I understand that if the vast majority of our society was people, lifting heavy objects, and we live in a manufacturing economy, working in factories, it would be impossible for a 67-year-old to actually work in these environments, right? These people could work if we forced them to. These are people who could be economically active, and so much so in that people are saying, I think it was in France, they were looking at increasing the retirement age. Yeah, I agree, Zio. I do agree that I should have been more clear with that point. You're absolutely right. But France are looking at increasing their retirement age to be able to make sure more people are economically, to be able to increase the amount of people who are economically active. We could do that here. But the issue is that you've already taken as a presupposition that the retirement age should be where it is right now, and that once you get to that age, suddenly after that, even though you could theoretically be economically productive, it's fine for these people to take welfare payments. But it's a pretty low-key wager where that line exists, though.
They shouldn't have any money from people who get off their backside and go to work every day. And the first point that this person made, you'll notice in the clip I showed of her, she started it with secondly. The first point was, why am I concerned? Because most of the money that goes into the welfare system comes out the pockets of people who are much richer than me. But it still comes out.
I mean, the first point it actually made was that the government budget isn't just like a household budget. And they're just thinking that it's money in, money out is a really kind of myopic way of thinking about it, and very simplified way of thinking about it. Saying my money is going to fund people and benefits. It's not like the government's just taking money and then handing it over to somebody else. That's not really what's happening here. And that a government budget is entirely, it's based off a huge amount of things, like there's money coming into the exchequer from taxation, from different kinds of taxes, from different sectors of the economy, from revenue generation streams, and from bonds, right? It's not all coming out of your pocket specifically. So it's a really myopic way of looking at something like this. And regardless, as I said right at the start of this segment, there is no reason for these people to not be consumers in the economy. Right at the start of my video, actually made on this one as well, and so at the end of the video that I made that he's responding to, he said I think he's acknowledged here, is that these people are people at the bottom of the end of the scale who do all most of the consumption in our economy. By not providing them with welfare payments, with benefits, etc., these people stop consuming, and it slows down economic growth. If you want higher GDP and a strong economy, you have to make sure that everybody is able to contribute to that economy, even people who are unemployed, right? So having this money being given out by the state when it will just go back into these people's pockets to then spend, which then go back into the economy, it's free. It's free, basically free to do this, right? It's really, really cost effective because they will buy products which then have VAT on them, moves back into the exchequer, or they'll be traded onto a company where they buy the products from, and then they'll get corporation tax, or then their employees get income tax. Like, the exchequer gains money from these interactions as GDP grows. So there's no point in getting angry at somebody taking a very small amount of money from the exchequer that then gets all consumed, and then lots of it gets gets recouped by the exchequer at the end of the day. It's just, you're demonizing a tiny minority because you've been told by the mainstream media that these people are a problem to demonize, when the economy could be just as strong and function just as well, because you're making a moralistic point about essentially what I was sort of saying before about how fair something is. Well, it's not fair that they get money from the exchequer for not working while I have to work. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit about fairness. Is the world better or worse? And I think it's better when the economy is stronger and the amount of work that you're doing together is less. The amount of lots of the economy is filled with pointless sinecures used specifically because there needs to be people having jobs for the economy to function in the way that it does, because so much of it's been marketized at this point. People sitting around essentially just pushing an abacus back and forth. But suddenly, these abacus pushers these people are somehow better contributing to society in your mind, rather than people who are on benefits just because they have a job for some reason. I don't care. I just don't care. That's why we need to stop talking about fairness and start talking about utilitarianism as a lens by which we view what is moral and what is not. Stop thinking about things as fairness, because it's really difficult to get these things across to people. The reason pension benefits are better than in work or unemployment benefit, they vote more, and don't forget a policy that goes against 100%. As I was pointing out before, Zio, there was how in the 2017 election, the only cohort of people who, when you look at the stratification of people's work status in the UK, in 2017, everybody voted in favour of Jeremy Corbyn if they were retired, full-time, so not if they're retired, sorry, if they're in full-time, part-time, student, unemployed, carer, disabled, full-time childminder or whatever. These people all voted for Jeremy Corbyn, apart from pensioners. Pensioners were the only group of the entire society, based on work status, who voted in majority for Theresa May. Where's the triple lock on universal credit, for example? Yeah, 100% exactly. And we even saw Liz Truss in the interview earlier today saying that she didn't believe, she was avoiding the question about whether or not universal credit would rise with inflation. And then as soon as she was asked about triple lock, she said yes. And you're absolutely right. Young people and working people need to vote more. 100%. It also doesn't help that the boomer class of retired people is the biggest electoral cohort as well. Hence the name baby boomers. They were born out of the baby boom, but you know what I mean, like.
Out of my pocket, so that's why I'm concerned. And you using that example, does that not completely undermine the leftist stance? Because leftists don't want those rich people to be as rich. So if they weren't, the likes of you and I and working class people would have to pay more into the system. So is it not a good thing that a lot of the money's coming out of rich people's pockets?
Well, I mean, as long as the tax system is fair and the exchequer is getting its money, I don't really care where it comes from. But whilst rich people do exist and we have the system we have now, they should get taxed more than people who work. But in a future socialist society, for example, like a market socialist society, the one that I want to see, where everything is cooperatively owned and run, and you have certain guarantees based on food and housing, things I was talking about previously. Yeah, maybe people should be incentivized to work more. Maybe that's better. But at the moment, we have a society where so much of what we do is being extracted by huge companies that then take money offshore and then just continue to raise the price of assets more than they ever could be, so that the people who are on the bottom rungs can't get access to them. These should be the people who the vast majority of the system should be able to take money from. How can we not see that if rich didn't get as rich, the poor would be getting more money to start with? It's not a zero-sum game. Yeah, 100%, absolutely. Then again, my full view is, of course, for fully automated luxury communism, in which case there would be no money and no class and no state, so the whole argument would be moot. But even under social democracy, rich people, under a leftist argument, there would be no rich people because there would be no class, no money, and no state in a communist society, right? But even from a social democratic perspective, because I always make these arguments from both perspectives, because people only engage with one of them, and if I just only make one argument, suddenly people will ask about social democracy, and I'll make points against social democracy. I'm going to do that argument as well. in a social democratic state, rich people will still exist. I'm not getting rid of the rich people, they're just getting taxed more, and certain sectors of the economy would be under state control because they're necessities or because they're inelastic. Right? That's a social democratic viewpoint. And most leftists, right? Most leftists that you're going to meet are just social democrats. I hate to ruin it. They'll have the hammer and sickle in their bio, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to policy, when it comes down to what they actually want to see in a short term, they're all just social democrats, and that's not going to change. And then under a social democratic economy, rich people don't get sent to the guillotines by the revolution. They maintain their idea how rich they are, but they just pay more in tax than everybody else. The rich people don't disappear under social democracy. But the main thing about social democracy is which parts of the economy are marketised and which aren't. And that's what we leftists really care about, is demarketisation, not just getting rid of all the rich people when it comes to the short-term policy platforms of most leftists in the year of our Lord 2022.
Final point you made in your video was saying that if there was zero unemployment, there'd be massive inflation. But there'll never be zero unemployment. And I'm not saying there should be. I'm saying there should be zero excess unemployment.
So what this guy here is conflating is between the economic participation rate and unemployment. Unemployment figures specifically refer to people who who would theoretically be in the labour participation sector, but are not because they're unemployed, right? People who are carers or are disabled or whatever, some things like that, these are not included in the unemployment figures. These are people who are not economically active and are excluded because they're not part of the labour participation rate. These are two different things, right? The idea of the excess unemployment is just a conflation of these particular economic precepts where, again, as far as the Bank of England is concerned, we should be targeting 4% unemployment. These are the people who are unemployed and who aren't people who you talked about previously, like the disabled, like carers, like people with full-time childcare. Although the actual issue that we have, the reason why the discussion of benefits is having in the first place, is because the government is cutting benefits for people who are already in work. Most people who have in-work benefits are people who already have jobs and also have children to take care of. So this guy just doesn't seem to want there to be people on full-time childcare. Feel free, if you watch this Egghead Reboiled, to correct this, but to correct my assumption about your position. Because again, if you don't hold that position, then my point is moot, but regardless. Even so, people who are economically active but are not participating, but are unemployed, for example, this is the unemployment rate that gets targeted by the Bank of England to be able to maintain inflation rates. And if these people all get jobs, we do get an inflationary spiral. That is just the case.
The welfare system should be for people who are retired, or people who are sick, or people who are disabled, or people, for example, single parents who can't go to work because they've got to stay home with the kids. Not for people who could work but choose not to.
Well, also,
Hey, one of my videos.
But also the people who don't work, again, could work but don't do, again, it's just people who are over retirement age but still able-bodied, which this guy doesn't seem to care about. And the people who have kids all the time, they could get a childminder. They could get a job, they could be economically active. I wonder why you think that you're happy for people who do full-term childcare should be able to get access to welfare system in your world about being tough on benefits. These people could get jobs. It's by their own choice, for example, to be able to have those kids. So why should they suddenly be economically inactive by doing so? But again, I don't believe that. But by the same logic, this guy would have to believe that kind of stuff too. Because again, these are all people that could participate in the labour force, but they don't. I don't think that's necessary for them to do so. But even so, I don't think the arguments that he's made for restricting welfare for people who are unemployed, I don't think any of this holds water, really. So yeah, not a great response to my video. I didn't respond very well in this video either, to be honest. I've mixed my words and mixed my metaphors and mixed my response very badly, but whatever. Well, I've got content for YouTube at the very least, so enjoy. And also like, comment and subscribe. Follow me on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. And you can become a member for 99p. And I'll see you on the next one.